Okay, I can go ahead and get started. We'll bring up the presentation. Thank you for joining. So I am Sarah Carmichael. I'm the watershed coordinator for the county. And we're just a quick intro about who I am. So I've been in the environmental world for over 13 years. But just 2 years with Story County. Before, I was the director of a nonprofit focused on river health and river restoration. And now currently with the county, I'm focused on multiple programs that I will get into shortly. And these pictures just show some work out in the field when I've been working with the county. So quick overview of what I'll be discussing. I want to make sure everyone's on the same page about watersheds and watershed management authorities. So I will give an overview of that. Then talk about water quality in Iowa and Story County, and then discuss our countywide watershed assessment, which was done in 2018. And then discuss the two main programs that I oversee, our monitoring program and edge of field batch and build for private landowners. So going through watersheds, the biggest thing to realize is that everyone in the world lives in a watershed. So what happens, here in Nevada when it rains is going to be different than what happens in the city of Ames. But basically what it is an area of land where all the water drains. So whether it's underground water or surface water, all of that is going to a specific place, whether that's a drainage ditch or a river, a lake, it's all draining to one area. And the boundaries of a watershed are determined by the topography of the land. So if we have hills or mountains or slope, that's going to give us the outline of our watershed. And watersheds are classified as HUC. So HUC stands for Hydrologic Unit Code, and that each watershed has a specific unique code. And that code determines or tells you what watershed you live in. And HUCs are determined by or broken down by land area. So we have our HUC 2 or region, and that's going to be our largest watershed. And you can see Iowa, that the majority of it is impacting the upper Mississippi River watershed, and the west part of Iowa is going to the Missouri River watershed. But then we can get into smaller land areas, and that's going to be our HUC 12s, and that's going to be our sub watersheds. So we have 32 HUC 12s actually in the county, and that impacts the county. Yes. We have a question.
Sarah is used to me asking, can I just walk up there and look at the little ones? Because I can't read them.
Yeah, for sure. So we can actually, this link, the watershed locator link, allows you to, if you were to Google watershed locator, that will take you specifically to this website. Are we able to get on the internet? Can I do that? Or no, that's okay. We're just, we're going to, if you click on that link that was on the PowerPoint. So this link was created by our friends at Prairie Rivers of Iowa. And if we could zoom in to, or if you type in Ames or Nevada, whatever you want to type in, it will take you directly to there. And then if you were to click on a specific area, go ahead and just click. It will bring up all of the HUC 12 to HUC 2. So World Creek is our HUC 12, and it's a smaller watershed. And then it goes into, of course, the upper Mississippi River being our HUC 2. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is a great tool, educational piece, and we can go back to the PowerPoint. Great, thank you. So those are our watersheds. And this is another great passive educational piece that we've done in the county. So if you're driving along county roads or even some highways, we have signs out there that says entering specific watershed. And it's just a great educational piece that we've been able to do on our roads. So that kind of gives an overview of watersheds. And like I mentioned, everyone lives in a watershed. But what's interesting about Iowa is that we have been able to create something called watershed management authorities. So each state is given their opportunity to manage their watersheds in a specific way. Iowa determined in 2010 that the Iowa DNR was going to manage watersheds. And the way that they do that is by allowing groups of political entities to come together and form a 28E legal agreement to work in the watershed. It has to be on a HUC 8 level, and every entity in that watershed needs to be invited to join the WMA, but not every entity has to agree to participate in the WMA. So the word authority is kind of a misnomer. We have no authorities as a WMA. You can't acquire land, can't tax, but what the WMA does really well is that they are able to gather the people together that can work to improve water quality, address flood issues, and really make a difference and make sure funding and activities are all going to the same place. Because the biggest thing with watersheds is that it doesn't stop at county boundaries, it doesn't stop at city boundaries. So we kind of have to work together as a whole. And this map shows all of our current WMAs in Iowa. Again, the DNR oversees this. And when a WMA is formed, the goal is that that group of people, they have to create a plan. So Story County is involved with 3 WMAs. 4 Mile Creek, the Slater is involved with that, but just a small section of 4 Mile. That's part of Story County. And that was formed in 2012, and they created a plan in 2015. And that's a very active WMA. They have a website, and they're continuing to work. So we attend those meetings. We give feedback to anything that's happening in that WMA. Then we have Iowa Creek, number 10, and that's another active WMA formed in 2012. And the plan came about a couple of years later. That is overseen by our friends at Prairie Rivers of Iowa. And then our newest WMA is the Headwaters of the South Skunk, and that was formed in 2018. And our plan just came out in 2022. And the plan, all of these plans can be found on our website, but that WMA, the Headwaters, is the most recent, so it has the most interest with all entities. And when I say political entities, I'm talking cities, counties, and soil and water conservation districts. So there's a lot of technical team members, including Iowa State, nonprofits, the state, Iowa DNR, and IDALS. We have their support and knowledge that we gain from them, but the only people involved with the legal agreement are cities, counties, and soil and water conservation districts. Okay, any questions about watersheds or WMAs before I move on? And Bryce is monitoring the chat, so if anything comes up, just let me know. So now I'm going to discuss water quality in Iowa first before I discuss water quality in Story County. But we know that Iowa has a lot of ag land. We are over 85% of land is used for agriculture, and we are number one in a lot of ag products: corn, soybeans, eggs, hogs, number one or number two in those categories. So there's a lot of winning for Iowa, if you will, but sometimes that comes at a cost to our soil health and our water quality. So the biggest thing that is happening that's impacting Iowa is the Gulf hypoxia zone. And this is considered a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, where aquatic life is limited or non-existent, and people that shrimp or fish down there have a difficult time because of what's happening. And the issue is that there's a lot of nutrients flowing down the Mississippi River, entering the Gulf of Mexico and creating that dead zone. So what happened in 2008, the federal government was trying to address this. And they said that every state that touches the Mississippi River needs to come up with a nutrient plan. So Iowa created the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy, and this is specifically to address nitrates and phosphates. It was created in 2013 by the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, IDALS, Iowa Department of Natural Resources, Iowa DNR, and then Iowa State University. And so it's been here for 10 years. And the goal is to, again, reduce the nutrient loads leaving Iowa, entering the Mississippi River by 45%. The way we do that is it's broken down into two different types of pollution. We have point source pollution and non-point source pollution. With point source pollution, it's going to be the easiest to regulate because we are only looking at wastewater treatment plants and factories. With point source pollution, you can go out to the creek or stream and you can point to that pipe that's coming out of that building and discharging into the river. So we know exactly what's happening, we know exactly where it's coming from, and we can regulate that. So the goal is to reduce nitrogen by 4% and phosphorus by 16% for those specific pollutant types. The other side of that is all of our non-point source pollution, and that's everything else in our watershed. So agriculture, urban, suburban, rural, animal operations, everything else is considered non-point source pollution. The litter you find on the streets could end up in our stream. That's non-point source pollution, but we're only, again, focused on nitrogen and nitrates and phosphates for the reduction strategy. So the goal is to reduce nitrates by 41% and phosphates by 29%. And this is a great strategy. The problem right now is that strategy doesn't necessarily equal regulation. It's completely voluntary. Whether we are able to decrease our output loads is still to be determined. And it's happening in some instances, but not happening in others. So there's no real teeth. It's very much a farm by farm approach or a city by city approach. And there's no real strategy for this nutrient reduction strategy. So with that said, addressing water quality in Story County. So what the county wanted to do is that since there's no real teeth at the state level when it comes to reducing nutrients, the county wanted to try to see what they could do, not only to reduce nitrates and phosphates, but to address water quality as a whole. So in 2018, they hired a company to do a countywide watershed assessment where they were able to analyze all the data out there and prioritize our Huck 12s and prioritize the streams. Again, there's 32 Huck 12s that impact Story County. So everything, all of our land uses are impacting those watersheds and those streams. And you can see with this picture that the majority of the priority areas are along the South Skunk and along Indian Creek. And that's kind of what the data showed, and what, if we were to focus our areas on, that would be the areas that we should work on. So with this countywide watershed assessment, there's 4 main areas that recommendations came through this assessment. So first is going to be resource protection, making sure any stream riparian areas in the county have some type of buffer, and that's actually prioritized by the different streams. So we have priority. So if it's a larger stream, it's usually going to have a larger buffer area, and so on, like going down the stream numbers. Also making sure wetland acreage, we don't lose any of that. We try to expand that in the county, and creating source water protection plans for any cities that get their water from source water. So that's our first goal. There's 4 sections. The second section is going to be addressing ag runoff. So working on infield and edge of field practices. The county has really stepped up on the edge of field side, which I'll discuss here shortly. Regarding infield, that's going to be like cover crops, applying fertilizer and plant nitrogen, applying that appropriately. But that's going to be working with the local NRCS or FSA office for producers and landowners. Third section is going to be stormwater management. So working with our cities in the county to create stormwater ordinances, also working as a county to create an ordinance. And then any development, trying to increase low impact development, like you can see here. This is mainly done in city or urban areas. Fourth section is addressing bacteria reduction. So not only working with animal operators, animal operators, but also trying to address pet waste in urban areas, wildlife waste as county at our local parks, and working with environmental health, making sure septic tanks aren't leaking, and rural septic tanks are functioning properly. So those are the 4 areas that we're trying to work on. And the way that we do that as a county is by having this internal implementation group. And this involves people from Board of Supervisors, conservation, planning and development, engineering, drainage districts. So we have a lot of people involved with this group, and we come together quarterly and we go through this assessment, and we have a plan, and we've broken up our plan into 3 main components: regulatory, programmatic, and capital improvement. And we have a lot of goals, and we've achieved a lot, but there's always something to do when it comes to water quality. So regulatory side, that stormwater ordinance I mentioned, floodplain ordinance, and then erosion and control management. For programmatic, it's a large section, and this is just a small, or it's a lot of that's on the implementation plan, but there's still more. But everything from reducing nutrients and bacteria, water quality monitoring, being involved with our WMAs, protecting native prairies. Lots going on in the programmatic side. For capital improvement, we're looking at making sure that drainage districts and county involvement, we're working closely together. There's not much we can do or change when it comes to drainage districts, but we do work closely with the engineer and making sure that any projects, at least the beef, and then making sure any projects that the county is doing has a positive or neutral effect on water quality. So that's kind of the overarching goals for the county when it comes to water quality. I'm going to discuss two of the main projects that I oversee. The first one is water monitoring. And we created a plan, a 10-year plan from 2021 to 2030. This came about because the state pulled funding for the statewide or DNR monitoring. So it used to be called Iowa Water, was the state plan for monitoring, and that funding was pulled. And so we decided that we wanted to continue monitoring our rivers and creeks and collect baseline data to help us not only see what is happening in the county, but maybe where we can focus our efforts. So we contracted with Prairie Rivers and they created this plan. This plan is on our website and we have 2 years worth of data, which is exciting. But the plan has 4 main components. So the first one is grab samples. So these are monthly samples that are taken from 15 sites. All of these black dots are sites that are either part of the grab sample portion or our volunteer portion. So for the grab samples, they're monthly. They get sent to the City of Ames laboratory and are analyzed at the laboratory. The other component of the plan is the volunteer monitoring, and that is done on site, and that's done every other week, so bi-weekly. And what we're testing for is we're testing for nitrates, phosphates, temperature, dissolved oxygen, chloride, pH, and turbidity. So there's 7 parameters that we look at. And that's again done on site, and the data is entered if after a volunteer monitors or at least twice a month, they'll input the data onto this website, Clean Water Hub, and all of these dots have data. So you can go on Clean Water Hub, it's through the Isaac Walton League, and you can click on one of those dots and it will pull up all of the data, all the chemical testing, all the biological testing that if it's been done at that site, and you can see trends over time. So if we have low dissolved oxygen in the wintertime, you can see that, or if we have high nitrates in the spring and fall, you can see that. So it's a really good snapshot in time of what's happening at that particular site. So that's the chemical part. We also have the biological part, which would be macroinvertebrate testing. Macroinvertebrates are just aquatic bugs, and it's good to look at what's living in our creeks to see if we have a variety of species and if we have a lot of different species, a lot of the same species. So being able to go out once or twice a year and do macro testing with our volunteers is a great way to determine the health of our streams. And finally, we do bioassessments, and that's done through myself and another county conservation employee. We go out with the state hygienic lab once a year to one of our public areas where a creek or stream is flowing through, and we'll do a more in-depth assessment that includes chemical testing and fish shocking and counting, and then macroinvertebrate testing too. So that data is all online as well through the State Hygienic Lab. Another component of monitoring is our E. coli. So we have monthly testing in the World Creek Huck 12 watershed. So we are looking at if the county city park, the Tedesco Environmental Learning Corridor, or TELC, that park, that new park just south of Ames, we are determining if there's any E. coli present. And there could be, because there's a lot of geese that nest there. But what we're doing is we're taking 7 different samples below the park and upstream into the neighborhoods to determine if there's any high E. coli. If there are any, outrageous E. coli numbers, we do post signage, but we have not seen, besides twice last summer, we have not seen, and I do that monthly throughout the year, as long as water is flowing. So that is one aspect of E. coli. And then I'm just gonna touch on the beaches. So all of these dots on this Iowa state map are beaches that are monitored weekly in the summer. So we test at Peterson Park and we test at Hickory Grove. We send samples in weekly. We get the results Friday. And that data is all on the Iowa DNR summer beach monitoring website. And we have been good this summer, no issues with E. coli at either place. We have a question.
Sorry.
You're good.
How often do they do the E. coli testing to determine if it's human or bovine or whatever? I know they did
Yeah.
once. I didn't know if that was a regular.
Yeah. So what you're referring to, what Laura's referring to, is the determination of if there's human waste present or goose or other animal waste present. That is very expensive. So we don't do that on the World Creek one. If by chance we do have a hit, then we're most likely, going to chalk it up to the geese at the park. But we haven't done anything beyond that when it comes to identifying E. coli. So the grab samples at City of Ames, they do test for E. coli. World Creek, I send it to the Iowa State, and then the beaches get sent to Iowa DNR. So we're covering a lot when it comes to E. coli, but we're also covering a lot when it comes just to those other chemical parameters. And we have 54 sites and over 40 volunteers and staff members that go out every other week to get that data. So gonna go through the 2 years of data. So 2021 was our first year. These reports, again, are online. Prairie Rivers does the reports, so it's on their website as well. But these are kind of the highlights from 2021. When it comes to recreational and waterborne illnesses, which we were just talking about, very low swimming beaches and the South Skunk. It was found to be high in creeks with very low flow, which is understandable because there's no flow, then that bacteria is able to just kind of breed, continue multiplying. And so there's no flush, if you will, to remove anything, any bacteria. When it comes to the Gulf hypoxia, we actually were too dry to really have any impact on the Gulf, which is of interest because we want to, of course, meet that 45% reduction goal. But due to droughts, we didn't have any flow into the Mississippi River from Story County. Nutrient enrichment, algal blooms, that's going to be phosphates, nitrates, making things like that. We did see it highest below wastewater treatment plants, which that is understandable. A lot of phosphate comes from that. But the good news with the county is that we have the city of Ames, city of Gilbert, Nevada, and Slater have all updated or currently in the process of updating their wastewater treatment plants, which is great. So we should, as time moves on, see less impact from wastewater. And stream ecology, that's going to be our macroinvertebrates. We did see low dissolved oxygen, and that's really hard on those aquatic bugs and that fish that we find in our rivers. So it does have an effect. For 2022, the highlights is that we were able to more than double the size of our volunteer program, which again includes volunteers, but also staff members, which is very exciting. That was due to just being able to hire a coordinator. I came on 2 years ago, and so 2021 was my first year, and I was able to really kind of focus my efforts on getting more sites, more volunteers, more supplies out into the county. And so we've done trainings, and if any sites do pop up, then, I offer it up to volunteers that we currently have, or I'll do a call out for more volunteers. So very exciting to see the interest from people in the county to be a part of that, because it's a year-round program and it's every other week. So it does take some time, but once you're out there, it's about 15 minutes of time. So it's not too bad. Then we also do something called snapshots. So every year we try to do one in the spring, one in the fall. We couldn't do one last year because it was too dry to do one in the fall, but we did do one in May, and we actually coordinated it with Polk County. So we were able to cover over 150 sites in both counties. We had, I think, about 40 or 50 sites. And Polk County has a very robust monitoring program, so they were able to cover a huge chunk of that. But what we found is that we had higher nitrate compared to chloride and phosphate in Polk County, which again makes sense due to Story County is more of a ag-based county, and we see more chloride and salt application in Polk County. And then we also observed very high nitrates at many sites, close to 75% of our sites. We had 20 milligrams per liter for nitrate. And the drinking water standard is 10 milligrams per liter. So it's a huge number. I actually saw one site that had 50, which I've never seen before. And so that was really shocking. That was in an area that was low flow, also south of a wastewater treatment plant. So just very, it was a big number. So if there's anything that happens, or if water comes to a drinking water facility, they do have the ability to remove nitrates at the site. But we also, want to make sure that what happens in the county we don't want to see 20 milligrams per liter. So that's results from last year. Any questions about that? Okay, yes.
Are you seeing more landowners that are wanting to participate to help minimize? I mean, have you seen, since you started here, in landowners wanting to address water quality initiatives? I mean, I know that they want good water quality for their practice as well.
Yeah.
But just some of the practices that you're referencing today.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. There's definitely been more interest and just having more people out doing testing. I've definitely been stopped a couple times, and our volunteers and staff have been stopped just to asking what's going on. And so it's a great educational piece of like, hey, we're, testing, we're on public roads and stuff, but we just want to get some baseline data and see what's happening. And then regarding the other component, when it comes to conservation practices, we have seen an increase in landowners and producers wanting to do more and protect water quality. Yeah. So the other component that I currently oversee is our Edge of Field program. And Edge of Field, so there's two main practices. There's other practices that you can put on the edge of a field to treat water quality, things like wetlands. But the two main practices that are involved with this specific program are saturated buffers and bioreactors. So this is a batch and build program. Typically, what would happen would be a landowner or producer would come into the local NRCS office and say, I'm interested in getting a saturated buffer installed. What would then happen is the team at the office would have to go out and do all of the survey work, would have to do all the design work, and then the landowner would have to upfront some money to hire an engineer and a contractor, and then they would have to do all the paperwork. So it was a lot of steps for the landowner. What's interesting about this program, and it actually started in Polk County back in 2020, I think is when they started. But they found so much success in this type of program that a lot of funding and in-kind support has gone towards getting more of these practices installed. So just briefly talk about, we have a saturated buffer, which is the lower picture. And what happens is that instead of the water going directly into a creek, the goal is to distribute the water down the buffer, and it allows the land and the plant material to filter that water before it gets into a creek. So we're trying to remove nitrates with these practices. So these are only focused on reducing nitrates from ag land. The other component is our bioreactor, which is the top picture. And it works the same way, but instead of distributing it into a buffer, it goes into this big pit that's filled with wood chips. And the wood chips, there's bacteria in there, and the bacteria use the wood chips as a food source, and it allows the bacteria to break down the nitrates, and it produces nitrogen gas. So then that clean water or the less nitrate filled water can exit and then go straight into the creek. So it's a way to decrease nitrates, but also help slow down water coming from ag fields. We have a lot of partners involved. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of funding and support. City of Ames is a huge partner. And then the state, IDALS, there's a lot of funding that the state wants to, that's putting towards these practices. And then of course we have the federal NRCS, and then Soil Water Conservation District, and each county has a SWCD, and they also support the commissioners there support this program. But the reason why it's so successful is that there's many components, but the biggest one is that it removes any barriers for landowners. So we're able to really do all of the work for them. We're able to go out and do the survey. We're able to hire the engineers. We're able to do all the bidding for the contractors to do the install. And the landowner doesn't have to pay anything. It's 100% cost share. On top of that, we actually provide a incentive payment of $1,000 per outlet that is treated. We give that on top. And the best part is that all of the money, all the cost share money doesn't go to the landowner. Usually they get cost share money from the federal government, and then they would have to pay taxes on that. We take all of that out, and we just take care of all of the funding and bidding and all of that. We just need access to the land. Both of these practices are kind of a set it and forget it design. So these water control structures, the kind of the circle in the picture shows the water control structure, and the goal is to engineer that at a slope where the water's coming in and they don't have to mess with anything in that control structure, because there's different levels that can be set. So there's also a bypass because we don't want to back up water into the field. So that bypass, it can go straight into the creek if there's a really big rainstorm. But we don't want the producer or landowner to have to worry about removing or adding anything to those water control structures. And with saturated buffers, the lifespan of the practice is forever. As long as it's there, it should be working. With bioreactors, the lifespan is usually around 10 to 15 years before the wood chips have to be replaced. And I'm finishing just on this slide to show you the success that we've had. We're in year 3 right now, but we have year 2021 is when we started in Story County, and we officially finished today. We we paid out the amount, and all the installs have happened. So we have 10 practices treating 22 tiles, and that's over 1,000 acres of drainage. So that's huge. 2022, we have done surveyed, and there's 8 landowners that we can move forward with. And that's in our design phase right now. And then 2023, we focused our efforts in the northwest quadrant of the county because we wanted to try to do anything above Ames. We finished surveying this spring, and we're looking for designers right now, engineers to design that. So it takes about a year and a half to 2 years to get the practices installed, but basically it's just, asking the landowner if we can get access to their land, and then they say yes, and then we go survey and do all of the work, and then we have a big signing date once the design is done. So very easy for the landowner. This picture just shows the install of our saturated buffer that was being put in spring. We had a field day out there, and this is actually the largest saturated buffer that's been installed in Iowa, I believe. It's almost a mile long. So we were able to treat 7 outlets on that specific one. So that is all I have for what's happening, what I'm focused on. There's a ton more activities that the county is working on when it comes to water quality, but this was just kind of a snippet of what's happening. Yes.
So I'm your last.
Yes.
Yep. So in 2022, where you've got 40 landowners that said, yes, they're interested. I'm assuming the surveys must take some time, because it says looks like you only surveyed 10 sites, or was it 10 sites out of those 40 yeses were compatible.
Exactly. Yes. So we 2022 was kind of the first year, and I kind of just tried to spread it out throughout the county. And I would look at it through aerial photos and try to determine the best locations. However, when we were to get out there, we realized like it wouldn't work due to there not being enough buffer, or there, it's all grassland and not corn or soybeans. So we were only able to move forward with approximately 10 farmsteads that we were able to survey.
So in 2023, the 40 letters that you sent out, are they 40 different?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So, yep, we just concentrated in that corner piece. And the exciting part is now we're talking with Hamilton County, and they are very interested in this program. So looking to expand into the area that the headwaters of the South Skunk is, the WMA that they oversee. So expanding the reach, which is very exciting. The city of Ames is interested in anything upstream of them to try to treat the water entering their facility. So they're spending a lot of money, in field. The county and the city split costs. So we're very involved with this program when it comes to financial component. But DNR or IDOLS and NRCS also provide a lot of financial support for this. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. No, please.
So I noticed that sometimes you refer to phosphate and nitrogen as nutrients and sometimes they're pollution. Is it
Yeah,
like nutrients when they're on the field and it becomes pollution when they're in the water?
that's
Or
correct. Yeah, for
Depends if
sure.
you're talking to the landowner.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say pollutants if I was speaking to a landowner specifically. Yeah, I would say nutrients. But yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
That, we want to keep nutrients on the land, right? We want, like, it's good. We need it. We need nitrates and nitrogen and phosphorus. We need that to grow our plants and grow the food. But we want to keep it on the land so it doesn't enter our creeks and streams. So
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the question. Anything online? Nothing. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.